Today we are going to talk about the properties of parallelograms, but before we do that, we are going to review a little bit on the distributive property. So first thing that we need to do, we need to remember when we have a number outside the parentheses that we have to distribute between both things. So in this case, I'm going to take 4 times x and get 4x, plus I also need to take 4 times 3 and get 12. Same thing can be here, even though it's backwards. I just have to do it in the order that it's given to me in the parentheses. So I'm going to take 6 times x first and get 6x minus, I also need to take 6 times 1 and get 6. So my answer is 6x minus 6. Here I have negative 2 times x. I get negative 2x. Now I have to be careful because I have a negative on the outside and a minus on the inside. That is going to give you a plus 14. Okay. I also, down in here, I have negative 5 times 2x. Negative 5 times 2 gives me negative 10x. Ooh. Okay. Plus my negative 5 times my 3 gives me a negative 15. So on this one, I can either have written as negative 10x plus a negative 15 or minus 15. Here, same thing. I've got negative 3 times 5, so negative 15x. Be careful here because I have a negative on the outside, a minus on the inside, gives me a plus 6. Okay? Careful here, I've got an x on the outside and I've got x on the inside. Remember that 4x times x, be careful with it, it's going to give me 4x squared minus x times 4 gives me 4x. Okay, good review for that. Now we're going to get into the properties of parallelograms. Okay, the biggest thing that we have to know is that a parallelogram, it's a quadrilateral, so it's a four-sided figure, and both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So in this case, QP is parallel to RS, and QR is parallel to PS. Okay, first property that we're going to talk about with a parallelogram is that opposite sides are going to be congruent. Okay, so if I have a parallelogram, if all the sides are parallel to each other, okay, then the opposite sides are also going to be congruent. So in this case, QP is congruent to RS, as well as QR is congruent to PS. Okay, so if HG is 3, then FJ is also going to be 3 because those two sides are congruent. Okay, FG is 5, so JH is also going to be 5 because those two sides are congruent. Okay, same thing happens down here. Opposite sides, DC is 9, so AB has to be 9. BC is 8, so AD has to be 8. Okay, sides opposite each other are going to be congruent. Okay, opposite angles are also going to be congruent. So in this case, Q is going to be congruent to S, and angle P is going to be congruent to angle R. Okay, and finally our last property is that our consecutive angles, so angles that are next to each other, are going to be supplementary. Okay, so in this case, y plus x is going to be 180. Y plus x is going to be 180. We can keep going around and doing that. As long as they're right next to each other, they're going to be supplementary. Okay, across from each other, congruent, next to each other, supplementary. Okay, so missing angles, we know that opposite, okay, opposite of P is going to be 70, so R is also going to be 70. Okay, we also know that angles right next to each other are going to add up to 180. So 180 minus 70, Q will give us 110, and opposite of Q is S, gives us 110 degrees. Okay, so if we try a few more of those, across from A is C, that gives us 60 because those are congruent, and then next to each other add up to 180. So 60 plus 120 gives us 180. So B would be 120, and then across from B is congruent, so that's going to be 120. Okay, same thing with this one. Across from D we have B, that's going to be 105. Okay, and then next to each other, so here or here, we've got 180 minus 105 is going to give me 75 there, and across from 75 is congruent, so that 2 is going to be 75. Okay, our last property that we want to talk about today is that if I have both diagonals drawn, they're going to bisect each other. Okay, so I have to draw both diagonals, and in that case QM is going to be congruent to MS, as well as PM is congruent to MR. Okay, so if we look at that, right here it says that VX is 3, they want TX. Since these bisect each other, these two are going to be the same, so this is 3. I don't know what these are, so I can't tell what those are, but in this case that'll be 3. Okay, right here we have GD being 9. They want us to find GF, so that's also going to be 9. Okay, this line here tells us that this whole thing, CE, is 22. So if I take half of 22 right here, that will give us 11. Okay, opposites are going to be congruent. So DA is going to give us 1.25. Okay, AB is 0.75, therefore opposite it is DC is also going to give us 0.75. Okay, opposite of P is R, gives us 87 degrees. Okay, next to it adds up to 180. So if we punch that into our calculators, we've got 180 minus 87 is going to give us 93 degrees. So if it's next to that, it's going to be 93. Across from it will also be 93. Okay, so if we remember all of our facts that go into this, okay, we have to remember that opposite sides are parallel. Ooh, that's bad. Okay, and I'm going to use the parallel symbol. Okay, opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Okay, this one we're going to use consecutive. So consecutive angles are supplementary. Okay, and this one, the last one, was diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so this slide right here is one that you're going to really want to keep in your notes so that you have all of your properties of parallelograms put together. Okay, if we look at a few, okay, we know that opposite of 131, so Y is going to give us 131 degrees, and then we have supplements here, so 180 minus 131 is going to give us 49 degrees for X. Okay, we know that opposite sides are congruent, so we have 2x plus 1 equals 5, because those are opposite each other. So 2x equals 4, x equals 2, and opposite sides are congruent. So I have my x, I now have 5y minus 3 equals 12, 5y equals 15, so y equals 3. Okay, same thing when they bisect each other. Here we have 3x minus 1 equals 14, x equals 5, and then in this case we've got this diagonal, so 4y plus 4 equals 16, and y is going to equal 3. Okay. Okay, a blank is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel. Okay, we've kind of been talking about that all day. That is going to be our parallelogram. Okay, are these parallelograms? This is not, because I have one pair of opposite sides parallel, but not the other. Remember that I need both sides parallel. Okay, in this case, I have both sides parallel to each other, so this one is going to be a yes. Okay, now we're going to find a whole bunch of stuff. JK is this side is going to be congruent to LM. Why? Because opposite sides are congruent. Okay, JKL is going to be congruent to the opposite one, which is LMJ. Okay, why? Because opposite angles are congruent. Okay, MNL is congruent to what? That's this angle right here. That's got to be congruent to angle KNJ, and we know that because they are what kind of angles? They're vertical angles. They're across from each other. Okay, MLK is congruent to opposite angle would be angle KJM, because opposite angles are congruent. JN, this right here, is going to be congruent to NL. Why? Because the bisectors of parallelograms bisect each other. In this case, NM is going to be congruent right here to KN. Again, because the bisectors of our parallelograms are going to bisect each other. Okay, across from C we have 65, so that one's going to be 65. This is 9, so this has to be 9. And they want Y. We know X and Y are next to each other, so they're supplementary. Add up to 180, so Y has to be 70 degrees. In your packets today, your assignment is going to be on pages, let me find it. Assignment today is pages 14, 15, and 16. Have fun.